Greetings, everybody. Welcome to our audience from around the world. We wanted to extend a big welcome to our presenters and panelists for this Think Tank 2022 International Leadership Conference. And I'd like to remind everybody in the beginning here that there is translation available for this program in various languages. If you're joining on the Zoom, if you click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, and you will get a selection of different languages. Please select the language that you are most familiar with, and then you can continue to listen to this program in your native language. There will also be time for discussion at the end of the program, and if you would like to submit a question to any of our presenters or panelists, please type it in the QA section. Use the QA rather than the chat window, and we will try to address some of these questions at the end of the program. So this session is sponsored by the International Association for Peace and Economic Development. It's one of the special focus associations of the Universal Peace Federation that was inaugurated in February 2020 by Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon at the World Summit. So my name is Roger Weatherall, and I'll be your moderator for this session today. So the purpose of the International Association for Peace and Economic Development is to look at different ways that economics and business can be used to promote a just and a peaceful world. Today, we're going to be hearing from two distinguished experts and three panelists who will represent America, Europe, and Africa. So we have different viewpoints from around the world, and they will be given the opportunity to respond to each of the presentations. So I'd like to briefly just introduce today's topic. So the existing Marxist economic system in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is based on a central control, with limited freedoms to access capital and investment, either internally or internationally. So this system has greatly restricted the ability of individuals and businesses to expand production capacity to meet the needs of its people. So business leaders, such as we have on the panel today, continually weigh the risks and rewards for their investment decisions. So they have to consider how and what incentives can induce the desired behavior, either to sell goods or services or to, get people to buy into their product. So our presenters are going to offer their constructive ideas on the actions that could be taken to facilitate and incentivize economic development on the peninsula, especially in North Korea, and to lay a foundation for future peaceful integration of North and South Korea, and to create an environment where North Korea especially, can become part of the global community. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. We're very privileged to have Dr. Raghavan Sitharaman, and he is the Group CEO of Doha Bank, one of the largest commercial banks in the state of Qatar, and he was named CEO in September 2007. Since then, he has overseen the bank's expansion from its base in Qatar to the United Arab Emirates, India, Singapore, and China. In 2015, Forbes magazine ranked Dr. Sitharaman as number 6 in the list of top Indian leaders in the Arab world. He's a chartered accountant and holds a certificate in IT systems and corporate management. He's the recipient of multiple doctorates from various leading universities around the world, and has been honored with the Best CEO of the Century for Peace and Humanity award by the World Humanitarian Drive in June of 2019. A great honor. So he is a leader who promotes sustainable development, green initiatives, and corporate responsibility, and is very concerned about making his company, his bank, an organization that really lives according to these principles and not just is there to make money. So we're really honored to be able to listen to his viewpoints today on the Korean situation. I'd like to turn it over to you, Dr. Sitharaman, If you could unmute yourself and begin your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. What a joy to be integral part of the interesting combination of panelists and speakers and integral combination of people across the globe for universal peace and prosperity. How do we create economic proposal to open and facilitate the relationship to North Korea and the war? That's the content theme. We live in a changing world, extraordinary set of changes and challenges we have witnessed. The pandemic itself has come with so much risk and governance. The human tragedy, human risk and governance again, social risk and governance, the way we live and articulate professional and personal life has changed. Economic risk and governance, monetary or fiscal prudence have been realigned to bring in financial stability, sustainability in real world order. We also have seen human development, human risk, environmental risk more than anything else. Rising sea level, increasing temperature, animal extinction, global warming and climate change has been the new focus. Now, in an interconnected, interdependent world, there is a defining moment that's now. 2008 financial crisis, financial economies are converting as real. The investment banks designed a product to deceive a common man. We lost trust and credibility in the eyes of the public. The financial system has created more challenges to bring in global stability. We redefined the game. Now, pandemic has given us enormous amount of guidance. This is a moment where we need to seize this opportunity and purposeful missions can be created. Here is the opportunity. As long as the world exists, good and evil will exist. Let's understand this. Peace is within us. We have to understand we are interconnected, interdependent community. Eradication of extreme poverty, gender equality, food security, and making sure universal health care, universal education, as I said, global warming and climate change. Add to that, digital evolution, digital revolution, I should say, is redefining the scope and performance of this planet. We have to embrace this change. And with this change, we can bring in greater prosperity to humanity for generations to come. There's a beautiful saying, Oriental saying, aim at short term, you cultivate flowers. If you aim at medium term, you cultivate trees. If you aim at eternity, you build humanity. That's what we need to do. We need to bring in righteousness within us as individuals. Again, as a famous saying of Dr. Abdul Kalam goes, if you aim at righteousness, there's harmony in the home. There's harmony in the home, there is order in the nation. When there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. So we need to understand this pandemic has given us a lot of positive values. How do we create business proposals in an environment where there is a disintegration? We have seen the reflection of Germany. It has come united with a concerted vision. World communities stood by the values of bringing greater prosperity for generations. Now it's a working model. We have seen disintegration, whether India, 75 years before when it was segmented, it has not given. United India was divided into different countries and still the conflict is on. Everyone is trying their own best to bring in values to their own fraternity. Sudan, again, another example, segmentation has not worked. North Korea, South Korea, which was segmented in 1945, still is in confusion confirmed. And it is oppression and suppression of human rights, social justice, freedom is not there. We have to unite them. Economic precedes politics. Gross welfare to the mass is the drive we need to bring in. We have to open the international economy to North Korea. The Kyosan industrial complex, which was commenced was the right concept on a demilitarized zone. I have been running business in South Korea for the last 16 years as part of this banking fraternity. Since 2006, I have visited demilitarized zone. I know how we can come together, setting up the infrastructure, whatever be the regime's thinking. The axis of evils around the world is always there, but we have to bring in the values for common good. If that is the case, we need to look at where we can bring it. This crisis, pandemic, we can use healthcare sectors. Global healthcare companies should set up, we should put back the demilitarized zone, Kyoto industrial complex, and make sure the business is revived, irrespective of the individual attempt or the state attempt to look at their purpose. Now, we need to also understand infrastructure creation, airport, seaport, road, rail. We need to create that value systems. Once people-to-people connection comes in between North and South, there is a possibility. Education sector, again, ignorance is a major driver. We need to understand, we have to enforce e-education today with fourth industrial revolutions we can bring in. Tourism is another opportunity. International sports events, they have got together in the Asian Games, the Winter Olympics in 2018. Now we need to, again, put back the opportunity to come together. Cultural expansion, music, drama, dance, the language remains the same, food habits remain the same. We need to use this window of the common space between North and South to develop this. To go for global telecom players should step in. And we have to create that purposeful mission to bring in greater prosperity. Public-private partnership model, we have to bring in. We have to ensure the business creates employment opportunities. And then again, the mission becomes more purposeful. Reopening of the Kyoto industrial complex is a key mission. And again, countries which have got specialization, if it is uranium, if it is copper, other rich minerals which is available in North Korea, you can put together if you understand India or China can come in. Exports, again, Hong Kong, China, US can step in. There are every area we have scope for opportunities. Gulf itself can contribute in terms of investment. So all these are possibilities than problems. So world at large should rethink wherever there are problems, integration is a solution. One world, one peace, one health, one family. We are global citizens. Love. Peace is within us. We will reinvent the peace by recognizing it's an opportunity for us to redefine ourselves. That's the presentation I want to offer, and I would like to respond to any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your words here, and I'm sure that a lot is going to come out in our discussion here. So we have three panelists, as I mentioned, who are going to be responding to what you have presented so far. And I would ask them to keep their comments to about 2 minutes each, and then ask your question, and then give you a chance to respond after each question, Dr. Sitharaman. So our first panelist is Miss Audra Haj, and she's the CEO of Ascension Exchange. She's been the driving force in launching and reconstructing over 3,500 companies since 2006, and grew up in over 32 foster homes. So she's had a difficult course, but has really grown through this experience and has learned how to embrace and master change through all of that experience. So with the support of her team in 3 locations in the US and 4 locations internationally, Ascension Exchange works to build better businesses for investors, to invest in utilizing systems, automation, and proven methodologies to launch, build, and scale companies. She's a sought-after speaker in leading economic change through systematization, technology, implementation, and accountability. So, Ms. Haj, would you please respond and then offer your question?
Thank you so much, Roger. First of all, I just want to say how incredible this topic is. The viewpoint that you are bringing to this very complex topic is really a breath of fresh air. I think a lot of times as we are economists and we are looking sometimes at numbers, we forget that there is a different kind of capital, and that's human capital. And the fact that you have brought up so many topics and so many profound points when it comes to, when we talk about the unification, when we talk about advancement, sometimes we forget that as we are bringing people in our perspective to a new place, the journey for them as individual people, we open the door and really we're going to see two things. We're going to see adults. I'm going to be very simplistic in what I'm going to say. Two categories. We see adults and we see children. I believe that part of what we need to be focusing on is the roadmap to integrate them in and bring them to something that they've never seen before. The bare necessities, for example, food, water, supplies, and also being able to help the next generation as well through this integration process. My question to you would be, what would you say if we were to have the two paths, the adult path and the child path? What would be the first thing that you would recommend on the human capital side to get them prepared for a different way of life?
Very interesting question. See, there are three factors which drives this world: desire, inequality, and ignorance. Our job is to recognize, you mentioned child and adult. Child is always happy, it's naive, and it has no preconceptions or prejudices. And it has got enormous wisdom, enriched inside. And as it integrates with the material surroundings, it gets into corruptions. When I say corruption, materiality and spirituality has to be the combination which we need to develop in human endeavors. Otherwise, the purpose of living will be defeated. The more we bring in values streaming for P2P, people to people, the society changes. A good person can change. A good corporate, a group of good corporate can change. A good nation, then it becomes United Nations. A group of good nations will eventually become United Nations. So the change comes with individuals. Now, more we bring in ethical and moral governance in the society. This crisis is a big lesson. Now, if you look at even Fortune 500 companies, those who are not committed for ESG, environmental social governance, they're out of business. They may be performing very well in terms of numbers. They don't have concerted vision to see that long-term prosperity is built in by means of getting this stakeholders' value. Then you are defeated. The world at large will neglect. That trend is on. That's a very positive change this crisis has brought in. So I would say bring in more ethical and moral governance. Human development. Bring in more sustainable value. United Nations have spelled out 17 goals.
Yes.
Goals. That should be the order for every corporate, every country. And that is the way forward.
Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting, I think, that both of you are bringing this back to the human level, right? We often think about economics as being just about numbers and money, but at the root of it, economics is really about how we relate to each other as people, right? So I think that's really deep. I would like to also next introduce our next panelist. This is Mr. Jose Ramon Riera. He is an economist and businessman in Spain with degrees from the University of Complutense of Madrid. He's currently the founder and CEO of 2 information technology companies in Spain. I don't know how you manage two at the same time, but congratulations. It's called What's Media and What's Cine. There's extensive sales management and executive experience working with technology companies in both the United States and Spain. He's a writer on public accounting issues and is a regular contributor to economic articles in the El Debate newspaper. He's received numerous awards for technology and innovation, including in 2017 being awarded the keys to the city of Miami. And I'd like to hear that story sometime, but I turn it over to you for your comment and question. Oh, sorry, you're on mute. You need to unmute. So we can't hear you yet.
Are you listening to me now?
Good, yes.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Thank you, Dr. Sitaram. First of all, let me tell you that I am impressed by your curriculum vitae and also by the magnificent exposition that you made during this time. I understood very well that the world situation is changing in a world that is interconnected. And the pandemic is an opportunity, of course. I agree 100% with you. And this opportunity is, we have to create something special to open the economy in North Korea. You probably know, in the year 2000, the GDP of South Korea was 0.624 billion euros, in dollars, around $0.7 billion, 53 times higher than the North Korea was at this time. In the year 2017, the difference had increased to 92 times. South Korea has a $1.6 billion and North Korea only 0.015 billion, okay? With this data, the longer we do nothing, the more difficulty it will be to unify the two Koreas. It's clear that many measures must be taken to resolve this gap between the two countries, and no more time can be wasted. On June 23, 1963, on the occasion of the 15th anniversary of the separation of Berlin, John Fitzgerald Kennedy said a very well-remembered phrase, Ich bin ein Berliner. I am a citizen of Berlin, okay? Dr. Sitaram, imagine that we, all the people that are around this conference, were in front of the North Korean president in Pyongyang, and we said to him, in order to gain interest, we believe that we are citizens of Pyongyang. And you, as a master of us, said to Mr. Kim Jong-un, I believe I can help you to improve the quality of life of your citizens, Mr. President. And let's imagine that the President said to you, what kind of measure would you propose to me as a banking expert?
Very interesting questions, very well thought through. See, you're talking to a person who is absolutely ruthless in his pursuit of practice. Developing a relationship with him with a clear focus that, as Buddha says, you love your enemies. Well, we don't need to hate anyone, but even if you say there are negative energy with someone, you think positive, the reflection will be positive. I'll go to him thinking that definitely he will throw me out. He will reject my thoughts or suggestions. I will surrender myself with a clear focus. My vision is long-term, and I'm going to tell him, how do we create opportunities for happiness for the people? It is not money. It is not power. happiness is a field factor. So that's what the approach. See, the Juche is a faith most of the North Korean embrace. It's not deviant from the rest of the human faiths, whether it is Judaism or Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jainism, or Christianity, or Islam. I think the spiritual value is the only link I can connect by telling him we love what you are aiming at to your people. So we can still, by bringing proposals in terms of bringing the global community in North Korea, in terms of all the areas which I mentioned in my speech, whether it is infrastructure development of healthcare or education or telecom, or how to modernize it to bring in gross welfare to North Koreans, and how the global community can invest, but still his regime will continue. Unless you give him a reassurance, he's going to, he's not going to accept anything. So you have to combine materiality and spirituality and give him the value proposition in terms of business.
Yes. I think it's important that we recognize that this is not going to be just a money solution, right? There's got to be values involved with this as well. I'd like to give a chance to our next panelist to offer their comments and presentation now. Mr. Joseph Busher is representing Africa. He's a Zimbabwean businessman and philanthropist, holds 4 degrees and 7 professional certificates in mathematical finance. And between 1994 and 2000, Mr. Busher worked for HSB Securities and Standard and Corporate Merchant Bank. And then in 2000, he founded J.M. Busher Investment Group, a social enterprise focusing on solution-driven investment management, long-term insurance, and general financial advisory services. And he serves as the managing director of that organization. He's also the founder of the NGO, J.M. Busher, 54 Races for Peace and Unity in Africa, which focuses on programs in Africa that support music, sports, education, and the arts in order to bring peace. So, Mr. Busher, would you offer your comments and thoughts on this topic?
Good evening to you all, and thank you so much for the presentation. Really, my question, possibly more than comments, because I know I'm just going to be presenting shortly, is that what can be done today so that we are able to bring about peace, security in the peninsula, Korean peninsula?
See, the primary focus of North Korea is continuance of the regime. That will let us understand this. If you try to uproot, bring in functional democracy, social justice, freedom, liberty, it's not going to work. Attempts have been made, and it's failed. There's a feeling of repugnance. Anyone goes there, it is an inconsistent behavior. We are seeing the reflection in many forms. There's no sustainable value creation in pursuit of, at least the rest of the global community. That's how civilized society interprets. The only way we can bring in peace and security and prosperity is to recognize his regime should continue. You can only slowly break the ice by reassuring, in universal terms, his governance will continue. But at the same time, we will bring in values to his system. Economics and greater prosperity comes out of global investments, and how for example, as bankers, how we can support the infrastructure creation by investing in various project specifics. North Korea has got strength. The economics was well outlined by previous speaker. Now, this is an opportunity. In terms of population, it's half of the South Korean population North Korea has got. If we have to bring in per capita income movement upward, if we have to bring in more welfare, the global investment has to come. So get back into business. Allow us to make sure that we do within your framework with a long-term commitment, and then start getting into, once society will become civilized, the more you integrate with the rest of the global culture, the more you integrate with the, integrate in terms of employment and making sure the idle capacity is eliminated, the purpose of missions will come in. So every country has got their own uniqueness. Those uniqueness we have to bring in the long-term interest and greater prosperity of humanity by the United Nations or global powers, global governance, if I use the expression, to North Korea. You have to pick up those countries which are still diffident. And then peace or prosperity is through business. And see that people enrich themselves and their livelihood should be changed.
Thank you.
So we have to collaborate more in various sectors. And, and again, converting global culture into the local culture and bring in human rights, social justice. You can expect the change. But you have to reassure his continuance in the regime. If you aim at regime change and then impose discipline, it will break.
Thank you very much for that response, Dr. Sitharaman. So we'd like to move on to our next speaker now so that we can have time for him to present. We have Mr. William Brown. He's a board member of the Korean Economic Institute of America and chair of the George Washington University's North Korean Economic Forum in the Institute of Korean Studies. That's about the longest title I've ever heard. So he writes prolifically and is interviewed frequently on programs such as Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, the Wall Street Journal, and the Korea Times, which is Seoul's leading English language newspaper, and Korean as well. His career as an economist and East Asia specialist has included extensive work in the CIA, Commerce Department, and the National Intelligence Council. He was raised in Gwangju in Korea by Presbyterian missionary parents who themselves were born and raised in China and Korea respectively. So he has a long history of understanding the culture and the economics of this region. I'd like to invite you now to give your presentation, and then we will hear some responses from our panelists, Mr. Brown.
Yes, thanks. It's quite a privilege to be able to talk with you all a little bit about North Korea, something very dear to my heart. I've worked on it for maybe 40, 50, how old am I? Maybe 70 years. But it's a complicated story. North Korea is very complicated. You know, this week we're hearing all these missile launches, a lot of talk about the missile launches. But I wanted to share with you, if this works, let me show something else that's happening. I like to, we say we economists like to work with numbers. On North Korea, we rarely have any numbers. So when I get some, I like to use them. Here's some numbers on the North Korean exchange rate, the won-dollar exchange rate. And in their plan system, they didn't use money. Kim Il-sung's system is a ration system. In Kim Jong-un's system, they killed their money. They inflated it to death. Now, one thing that Kim Jong-un, the current president, has done is done a good job of getting control of his money. And that bar across the top is a long time, pretty steady exchange rate of the dollar versus the won. This graph is a measure of the dollar. So falling is falling dollar, rising won, okay? But look at what happened just in the last 2 years. The won has been appreciating quite a lot as they stopped trade. So they're not buying anything, so their won is appreciating. And they're having a very tight monetary fiscal policy. But just in the last week, you see it, the value of the dollar jumped about 20%. You can look at China's renminbi, the same thing. Although it's even, the yuan has been even stronger against yuan than dollar. It's very odd. And then this, just the last graphic. This one shows to me is illustrative of how well the markets are working in North Korea. And up until October of 2020, you could see this is the value of the exchange, the cross rate between the yuan and between the yuan, Chinese yuan, and the US dollar in a Pyongyang market. And you can see it was very spot on with the world price for yuan dollar. Exactly. That to me told me it was a good market. Since then, though, it's gone quite wild. Something dramatically has gone wrong with their monetary system. So that's just a that's just to me a illustration of what's going on in North Korea. A lot that we don't know. We focus on the missiles. We don't focus on their exchange rate. I like to always say that, predicate my talk on the idea that North Korea should reform, then open. Chinese love to say reform and open, kebal in Korean. But I think the order is extremely important. Reform, then open. That goes a lot to what our former speaker was talking about. Reform internally, to me, though, needs to happen. Why is North Korea so poor? We know it's incredibly poor. It's not lack of resources. They have modest to strong human capital. Everybody almost can read and write. They all go to school. There's great natural resources, minerals and metals. They've got a lot of factories. The socialist system built them a lot of factories. The problem, though, is weak productivity, extremely poor use of all those assets, capital assets. I would say probably the worst in the world. They're worst in the world at using their high level of human capital. You can see that in their missiles. So why is it weak productivity? Why is it? It's because of this dual command market system that they've got. The command economy, the planned economy broke down in their big famine, but it's never been quite replaced by a market system, half and half. So they're kind of caught in this trap between the two. It's partially dollarized. Their dollars and renminbi and yuan all circulate pretty freely. Very odd in that respect. There's still a great deal of state or collective ownership of land and property, very little private property. And this failed command economy still is sitting around and is stopping private investment. If we're looking for a solution, as I say, it has to come internally. It cannot be imposed on the outside. But there are two big reforms that North Korea could learn from its neighbors. The first one is from maybe a rival president. A lot of people now call him a dictator, President Park Chung-hee, South Korea. I was living there when he was president. He created in 1962, 63, a brand new money and banking system. Your people in Gadar should really appreciate it. It's a system that rewarded savings, and mostly important, it took those savings and it allowed people, millions of people, to invest them productively. The command economy of North Korea collected a lot of savings, but the state was in charge of investment. And of course, they did a very poor job of it. And the second big reform they could learn from Deng Xiaoping in China in 1978. I was studying China closely at the time. And that's the decollectivization, getting rid of the collective farming system that has caused a starvation, famine all across the world, in Soviet Union and in China and in North Korea. They should learn that collectivized farms just don't work. Those two sets of reforms, I'm convinced, would push North Korea. They could do that internally. They don't need a relief from the sanctions to do either of them. They don't really need foreign investment for either of them. They've actually had a lot of foreign investment over the years. a great amount of foreign aid, and it's been generally wasted by this command system. They don't pay back their debts. So they have a very poor credit rating. Nobody, I don't think the Bank of Qatar would lend them any money. I wouldn't. But with reforms, South Korea was the same way in 1962. And you can see 1962, South Korea was the worst saving country in the whole world. Can you imagine that? OECD data. By 1980, like a generation later, they're the best saving country in the world. Well, North Korea could do the same thing with the same kind of policies, create a new money and banking system. Now, the great thing, Kim Jong-un has, I've talked to some North Koreans about this, and they seem to agree, actually. They agreed quite well in one conversation I had. And I think President Kim has actually moved quite a long way on both of these accounts, half steps toward marketizing the economy, giving banks a little bit more role, allowing foreign currency, giving North Koreans a savings vehicle. The problem is the savings vehicle is $100 bills, US. They can't use their money to, they can't use it in a good way to invest in their own country. Property rights are just terrible. So why would they invest? So there's something that's holding them back. This has been going on for 10 years now. I would say I'm with all of y'all. It's the time to change. And North Korea needs to move quickly now to finish these half steps. I have some ideas on how to encourage them to do that, but it really has to be their own idea that does it. So that's my comments, and I'd appreciate any questions, other discussion on this very important topic.
Thank you very much. You have really raised some important points and given us some details of what's going on. I'd really like to understand a little bit about what's causing this fluctuation in the currency exchange rates there at the moment. But I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hodge here to provide her comments and question as well.
I'm going to start off with just, wow. Let's start off with that, because this is absolutely an incredible perspective. Some of the things that really intrigued me about what you said, and that is from my perspective, where I sit in my chair, is productivity. That word was a very interesting use of a word in this topic, because productivity is something that is the foundation of a lot of people's pride. It is the measurement of forward motion, right? So when I think about what you said, and I'm watching the fluctuations and I'm watching the different changes that are happening, I think about when it comes to the essence of who they are as individual people in the country, the resourcefulness, the ability to possibly introduce something that would be a reward system based on the productivity and the results that they are achieving. So I guess my question to you in regards to this would be, if productivity is an issue, what would you recommend that we could do to help document, reward, and possibly teach others by example from within the country, to be able to show them that the productivity is acknowledged, rewarded, and now duplicated? Is there anything that you might recommend as a path forward to that?
Yeah, very, very perceptive question, I think. And it's very hard to do because it's hard to get into North Korea. And my point is they have to do it themselves. So, what is the outsider going to do? One thing I'm going to, with regard to productivity, I want to make sure people understand, I'm talking about labor productivity and capital productivity. Mm-hmm. So it's not like North Koreans are lazy. They work incredibly hard. They're renowned for their discipline. They build things incredibly fast. They call it Pyongyang speed. Well, wow, it is fast. It takes them 1 year to build a big building. Well, we built a Pentagon in 1 year. It takes us 14 years to extend a stupid subway line here. It's just crazy. So they're very hardworking and they're very disciplined. The problem, though, is their system doesn't reward, it doesn't induce them to make the right kind of decisions. A great example is in the farming system. They have about a third of the population farming, and they can't feed their own country. That's absurd, right? It's not a great country for farming, but still they should be able to feed themselves. If not, they should be exporting their food, but they can't export because of all these fixed prices. They have two prices for everything in North Korea. Think of that. Everything has two prices, very different: the state price and the market price. So if you're dealing in the market, you deal one way. In the state system, which is millions of people, half the country basically, it's in the state system, a totally different. So what that just breeds corruption and bad decisions. It's destroying the civilization of the country, this corruption. It's very sad to see. So if you want a wedding, you have to pay money for the wedding. That's just crazy. You know, so I think they're very, very smart. They study hard. They learn, as I can say, they read and write. They read extensively, I think. They learn from China. They don't learn too much from South Korea or Japan. But I think to my mind, the way in is through China, because there's a lot of back and forth with China. And the Chinese have gone through this. Chinese I talked to, they understand this very well. Yes. So I'm thinking somehow we need to encourage more Chinese, North Korean talk about this important kind of issue. But I don't have a silver bullet. That's a really good question.
Some good suggestions, though. Thank you. Let's go to Mr. Riera now for your comments.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for your presentation. First of all, let me tell you that I'm overwhelmed by your curriculum, by your experience, and I also was impressed by your presentation of North Korea, and especially by the two disruptive proposals that you have presented to us. And if which they are implemented, no doubt lead to a change in depth and structural to the country. As you well know, you talk about the productivity. The income per capita in North Korea in 2017 was $700 US. And it means that he occupies the position number 180. You said the productivity is the worst. The income per capita gives North Korea the position 180. At the same time, South Korea has a per capita income 46 times bigger than North Korea. That means they give the 30th position in the world. To make big changes in the world, from time to time, we need to have a dream, like Martin Luther King. So I ask you to have a dream. Imagine that tomorrow you may meet Kim Jong-un and says to you to make a wish for their economy that he can accept. What would you ask for the President of the Republic of North Korea to be implemented immediately? What do you recommend?
Great question. Because I do kind of imagine, meeting Kim Jong-un. Unlike President Trump, I've never had that opportunity, and I won't. I'm pretty sure I won't. But I do imagine talking to him, and I've talked to a few North Koreans. What I would tell him, and this is not as an American so much, but for him, because what you're suggesting is he has to buy into it. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. And what I'm going to tell him, what I would tell him is, you've got a money problem, right? Everybody has a money problem. We know you have a big money problem. US dollars are circulating. You don't like that. You don't control dollars. So how it shows disrespect for your economy that people are using dollars and not won, right? So what is your money problem? You've done a great job of controlling the money in the 10 years. There's not much inflation. That's great. Great activity to control inflation. So now you're building the base for a monetized economy. Money is great because it creates the right incentives for people to make good individual decisions. So you've done a very good job on that. Continue that work. Continue to be fiscally conservative, like our government is not, right? They can't run a deficit. So they're very conservative that way. What I would argue is your government is strangled for lack of credit. You can't print money because you're afraid of inflation or that the dollars will take over. So by not offering credit to your companies or running a deficit, you're strangling your country. And in your system, investment comes from the government, so there's very little investment. It's killing you. And you know that better than I do. So what I would say is take a page from the Chinese and start a little bit. You don't have to do it wholesale. Start privatizing your assets. You, Mr. Kim, own your whole dadgum country. That's the problem. So why don't you sell a little bit of it? Sell some coal mines, sell some land, reform your agriculture. Give your people a little bit more credit and more assets, more capital. Then you'll have millions of people making decisions and not just your 10 or 20 policy people here in Pyongyang. Yeah. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you.
Certainly, I think it's a valid strategy, privatization of the assets of the country. We've seen that work in so many places. So I'd like to change the structure of our presentation here, because I know that Mr. Joseph Buscher has actually prepared a little bit of a presentation himself and has put together some statistics and thoughts and ideas. And although we were initially just going to have him speak as a panelist to ask some questions, I think it's very valuable to hear from him. So Mr. Buscher, I'd like to invite you now to give you a little presentation, and then we can bring everybody back on and we can have a discussion around everything. Is that good for you?
Thank you so much. I was going to ask Mr. Brown really just one question that certainly I agree with that the North Koreans are very disciplined. There is a great amount of self-determination. And as he says, they could do it themselves internally, but wouldn't that be defeating really the purpose of integration? Because we live in a global village. The return on assets is low, as you put it. The return on capital employed would be low, given the fact that there is not massive utilization of the assets they have, and to be able to tap into the knowledge system and basically what they have managed to build on their own, despite the sanctions they have.
Yeah, that's a great question. And remember, though, I've said reform, then open. I'm not against opening. Opening to me means integrating with the rest of the world, with South Korea, but with Japan, China, everybody, with us, with the United States. So opening is very, very important. What I'm arguing, though, is, and I take this actually from my South Korean experience, is that opening before reform can be catastrophic. You're not ready, the foreign, or even from a, I grew up in the South after the Civil War. So, there's tremendous northern, all kinds of people weren't ready for that kind of opening. And there was, to me, North Korea has tried to open before. It's actually had a lot of foreign investment from Europe and a lot of foreign aid, a lot of Chinese investment, a lot of Japanese, even the US investment. But the problem has been this dual pricing system, this command economy system, lack of property rights, that's created bad news for the foreign investor. And North Korea is basically bankrupt. If you look at their, they don't pay debts. They wouldn't get a decent credit rating if they try to open now. It's a big difference with China. So to me, it's like a bankrupt company, but a company that's not insolvent. It's illiquid. It doesn't have cash. It has plenty of assets, but it somehow needs to convert those assets to liquidity. And that's what I mean by this reform. Once it starts doing that, maybe quickly, it can start bringing in the foreign side of it. Certainly, it needs to export. From day one, it needs to create a better export. The aid that's poured in there has killed their exports. They used to be a good exporter. They're not anymore because of all this aid that's coming. So to me, these internal changes, and here I am a little hopeful because I think Kim now is focused on the domestic economy, focused on trying to make some internal changes. He's just somehow not able to push it all the way. And that may be where the foreign side can help him push it to another level. But anyway, it's a great question. But to me, the order of reform and opening is kind of a new thought that I've had. But to me, it's just incredibly important for Kim Jong-un.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph Buscher, did you have some additional thoughts that you wanted to share? I know you had prepared a document that would you like to highlight?
Let me just go through that. I really want to thank Father and Mother Moon, the co-founders of the Universal Peace Federation, for their vision and foresight. The foresight really to say there's really nothing we're going to be able to achieve as the human race without peace. I'm very grateful, to be having this opportunity to participate at this Think Tank 2022 Global Forum, a virtual conference, where the theme really is toward peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And I've been asked to present on the economic proposal to open and facilitate the relationship of North Korea and the world. Peace is the umbilical cord for unity, togetherness, harmony, and love. The history of North Korea is linked to that of South Korea, the Korean Peninsula, which is surrounded by China, Russia, and Japan, and all of them are great nations. The relationship between North Korea and the world is well documented. There's cold, warm, and hot. There are 197 countries, aiding Taiwan and Kosovo in the world, of which 193 are member states of the United Nations. North Korea is an observer member of the UN, a full member of the Non-Aligned Movement, a member of the Group 77, and a coalition, and also a member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. North Korea has diplomatic relations with 166 countries out of the 197, with about 50 embassies in 50 countries. It does not have good relationship, as we know, with the United States of America, Israel, Japan, and Taiwan. It has stronger ties with China, where about 95% of its imports come from. And certainly it has a lukewarm relationship with its sister country, South Korea. And really the talk here is about its relationship with South Korea and the unification with South Korea, because that's where it has to begin. So North Korea borders, as I said before, China and Russia on the north, and South Korea on the south. And all of them are very well-developed nations. And Japan, its neighbor, which is still unhappy with, is the third largest economy in the world. So possibly the question we could ask is, why? Why is there a massive disparity in social and economic development in South Korea, and in North Korea rather? And to put that into perspective, what I've done is provide a comparative statistical review of North Korea and South Korea. South Korea's population is double that of North Korea. But interestingly, the GDP is about 95 times bigger than North Korea. GDP per capita is 55 times, and it's ranked about 10th, that is South Korea versus 115 of North Korea. If we go in terms of exports, South Korea exports 4 times more than what North Korea does. And FDI And I know Mr. Brown talked about that you know, they could do it themselves, but certainly we need foreign direct investments to be able to spur private participation in the economy. We have 230 billion in FDI in South Korea versus about 1 billion or 2 billion in North Korea. Inflation is sitting at 20% versus 0.5. And if you look in terms of unemployment, the story is the same. Certainly, I think the people of South Korea have got a better opportunity than those of North Korea. So what does this mean really in terms of the integration and in terms of cooperation and in terms of really integrating North Korea into the world of nations? We have to be able to look at few things, I believe are the problems, among other problems. I think Mr. Brown mentioned that certainly North Korea is the closed and centralized economy, command economy, we can put, where the means of production are controlled by the state, although there's little private activities. The sanctions have certainly, and trade restrictions have compounded the problems in North Korea. They are not member of the World Trade Organization. And this status quo has been like that for a very, very long time. And the question is, how do we change it? Because I think that is really the point, to say, you know, how do we bring North Korea closer to the world? But before they can do that, how do we bring North Korea close to South Korea? Because they were one at the same time, at some stage.
Yes. And Mr. Butcher, I know you have many additional points, but we want to leave a little time for discussion here at the end. And perhaps you can bring out some of these points in our discussion here. So could we bring all our panelists back onto the screen? And we do have a couple of questions from the audience that we would like to post at this point. There's been many questions about what can we do from outside, sitting here in America or Europe or Africa or whatever. If there was an opportunity to help North Korea at this point, what would be your recommendation? So why don't we start with Dr. Sitharaman first? We haven't heard from you in a while. What are your thoughts on that? Sorry, I think you're on mute still. We need you to unmute.
It's a good question. See, the business should flourish. Use the demilitarized zone as an opportunity for common grounds. Bring in North Koreans and South Koreans. Bring in the global community, whether it is trade or investments or sports or culture, or even minerals or mining, whatever be the industry specific. Use a common platform to bring in, one, between North Korea and South Korea, two, bring in global convergence into the demilitarized zones and ensure you bring in values to North Koreans in addition to South Koreans. Once the economic prosperity is visible, I think every ruler will come to terms. Show him the opportunities, show him the welfare for his people, create more employment, economic momentum for the country. Global community can unite and then set up their infrastructure in multiple form and substance in the common zone.
So Mr. Brown was talking about how aid has failed in the past and has actually led to decline in exports and problems. Mr. Brown, would you like to offer some commentary on what we can do from outside?
Yeah, and I think the Kaesong Industrial Zone is a great example. I was actually invited to attend the opening of it, 15 years ago. But I wrote something, and then they took away their invitation. What I wrote was, this is a great idea to have this industrial zone between and the DMZ. But the rules have to be you pay your workers directly. You don't pay them through the state. in North Korea, and it's changing, this is what I like, but still most workers are paid by the state, not directly. That's really kind of like a slavery kind of system, if you think about it. They're paid rations. So they're giving out their food and whatever they need. You know, maybe they're treated pretty well, but they're not given real money. And I said, you know, if you can't give them real money, it's not a reform project. It's just feeding the state system. They objected to that. I didn't go on. That's not the only reason. But I would still say the same thing today. Now, one of the speakers mentioned North Korea is a member of all these UN organizations. One important one that it is, two important ones that it is not. One is the ILO, the International Labor Organization. One of the rules in the ILO is that countries, the economy should pay people's wages, not through the government. It's very explicit. I can't remember the number. They have 10 things. That's one of them. North Korea is not a member, I think, because of that. So everybody should be pushing for North Korea to join the ILO and abide by that rule. That would help a lot. The other part is similar, is the WTO. They've been invited to join the WTO, but they can't. And the U.S. has huge trade restrictions on tariffs on any country that is not a member of the WTO for very good reasons. We can't deal with this two-price system that corrupts everything. And that's what we put on the Soviet Union back in the day, and China back in the day. But China and the Soviet Union, Russia have all conformed to the WTO and work on basically on market principles. Even China does. So if North Korea can work that way, then the U.S., I would argue the U.S. should take the initiative here and remove, not the sanctions, that's a different issue, the nuclear issue, but I would remove our high tariffs on North Korean exports as they join the WTO. That's, I think, an initiative that I would propose and push. I think it would actually give the sanctions a little more meat, because it would offer, you know, before the sanctions, North Korea wasn't much better off. The sanctions haven't hurt North Korea that badly. They were not trading anyway because nobody would give them credit. And they can't export. So I would argue, you know, help them join the WTO and help them join the ILO.
Yes. So the ILO and the WTO. Okay. I see, Audrey, you have your hand up there. Did you want to make some comment about this?
Absolutely. You know, it's an interesting question that was presented to us, and that is sometimes the invitation to have inward success from the outside is a hard concept. So when we talk about how can we from the outside possibly help or make an impact, I think one of the things that I would recommend is that we send advisors from possibly our collective countries to go and advise from within, but have it presented by somebody that is familiar to them. I believe very much so that building and reforming, the way that we can do that is by focusing on people's individual strengths. It's a very foreign concept, not only in other countries, but even in our own country, to be able to find something that can identify our top 5 strengths, focus on our strengths, spend very little time on our weaknesses, and quickly give people the ability to stand in something firm that is organic, that they can touch and spread within. So for me, I believe the answer would be that we could bring someone from collectively around the world to integrate in, teach them to be the teachers of their own people.
Thank you. And we need to wrap up here, so I'm just going to go to our last 2 panelists. Mr. Riera, could you offer some closing comments around this, and then we'll finish up with Mr. Busher there. Sorry, you're on mute. Okay,
thank you. For me, it has been a really interesting meeting, and I think that Mr. Brown has put a lot of things over the table that we need to take care in the following years. If the North Korea wants to implement a new model of, let's say, a new banking system, according with information that Mr. Brown gave us, in South Korea, it took from 1962 to 1980 to build and to maintain as a new strategy, okay? 18 years is a lot. And it means that if today the gap is a 95% of GDP between South and North, 18 years more, it will take a lot of time. I think that we need to propose something special, like Mr. Brown said to Kim Jong-un, in order that he starts immediately to do something. If not, the distance between South and North is going to grow, and perhaps arrive at 200% or 300%. And at this time, North Korea will be nothing. It's nothing in the world because be the 880 country on a GDP per capita, it means it has no reason to be. If we want to save North Korea and integrate with South Korea, we need to convince the president that to do something immediately. And I think these type of proposals are here over the table to show him, to send him perhaps a letter well redacted and well prepared in order that he understands that he needs to move forward.
Thank you. Yes, definitely some action is needed soon. And Mr. Buscher, would you like to offer some closing commentary as well and your thoughts on what could be done?
The first issue is to allow North Korea to join the World Trade Organization. That will allow the world to enforce IAED rules adhere to international laws, but also I think to be able to subscribe to the United Nations principles of responsible investments. That's the only time we'll be able to ensure that the citizens of North Korea work under the same conditions as many other people. And I think by embracing that, by allowing them to do that, we can also take advantage of their comparative advantage, which is really in technology and design.
Thank you so much. It was a little hard to catch what you were saying at the end there, but I hope that we can circulate your entire prepared notes to this to the people who participated in here at some point. I'd just like to conclude with saying a big thank you to everybody who has been presenting today. I think we would all agree that we could, continue this discussion for about another 3 hours and still just kind of touch the surface. And any one of you could probably hold down this conversation for the entire hour by yourself. We could have an interesting program around that in the future. So perhaps we will have an opportunity to do that at some time in the future. But in the meantime, I wanted to close today's session and invite everybody to participate in our next program, which will be coming up in about 45 minutes from now, where we will be listening to the Media Association for Peace that will be engaging in this topic and talking about future plans and how the media can support this effort to bring peace on the Korean Peninsula. We're also going to be, I know that UPF, both in Europe and Africa and the United States, has various programs coming up in the coming months, and we would invite you to check out their websites and find out what is coming up soon. Thank you very much, everybody, and a warm round of applause from our audience, even though you can't hear it.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Excellent session.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Muchas gracias.
Formidable en español.